Jeffrey Epstein's story reads like a modern tragedy that never quite ends, a tale of wealth, secrecy, power, and one of the most notorious criminal investigations in recent American history. Born in Brooklyn in 1953, Epstein briefly worked as a teacher before shifting into finance, where he built connections with the rich and powerful. People at the highest levels of business, politics, and entertainment began to orbit around him, attending parties at lavish homes in Manhattan and the U.S. Virgin Islands, flying on his private jet, and dining with him at exclusive events. For years, Epstein cultivated an image of a financier and philanthropist, but underneath that public face was a hidden life that would explode into scandal. Epstein's first serious brush with law enforcement dates back decades. He was long rumored to be involved in inappropriate conduct with underage girls, and as early as the mid-1990s, there were reports to authorities that he was engaging in troubling behavior. A report filed with the FBI in 1996, later unsealed among government files, recounts a complaint alleging that Epstein had possession of photos of minors, with threats made to the accuser if she spoke out. That complaint, and others like it, did not immediately lead to major federal action, but they set the stage for later scrutiny as new information emerged. The most significant early legal reckoning came in the mid-2000s in Florida, where local authorities investigated Epstein amid allegations involving underage girls brought to his Palm Beach residence under the guise of massages. That investigation eventually resulted in a controversial plea deal in 2008. Epstein pleaded guilty in state court to prostitution charges involving a minor, served a relatively short jail term with work release privileges, and a wide net of potential federal charges was set aside in exchange for his plea. This non-prosecution agreement later drew immense criticism from victims and legal experts who argued that it allowed a powerful man to escape full accountability for years of abuse. Despite the discontent over the 2008 outcome, it was not until 2019 that federal prosecutors made their most serious move. In July of that year, Epstein was arrested at Teterboro Airport in New Jersey on federal charges of sex trafficking of minors and conspiracy, brought by the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. The indictment detailed how Epstein and several associates allegedly recruited and paid underage girls to engage in sex acts at his homes in Manhattan, Palm Beach, and his private island in the U.S. Virgin Islands. It pointed to a network of people who facilitated the encounters, arranging victims' travel and payment in ways that federal prosecutors said showed a systematic pattern of exploitation. The grand jury charged him with violations of federal law related to sex trafficking and conspiracy to commit sex trafficking, laying out a case that federal authorities intended to take to trial. Epstein was detained at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Manhattan as he awaited trial, but his criminal case never reached a courtroom. On August 10, 2019, he was found unresponsive in his cell and later pronounced dead. The official medical examiner ruled his death a suicide. Subsequent investigations into his death uncovered significant failures in his monitoring, including guards falling asleep, falsified logs, and lapses in enforcing suicide watch protocols despite earlier signs of distress. Newly released Department of Justice files in late 2025 reinforced that it was lapses in the Bureau's procedures, not evidence of foul play, which allowed Epstein to take his own life while in custody, even as he had repeatedly denied any intention to harm himself based on his personal and religious beliefs shortly before his death. Epstein's death did not end the legal saga. Instead, it opened a new chapter of scrutiny, civil litigation, and a slow release of sealed evidence that has kept the story alive for years. Central to this ongoing chapter has been the role of his longtime associate Ghislaine Maxwell, who aided in recruiting and grooming victims. Maxwell was arrested, tried, and convicted in 2021 on charges including sex trafficking, and she is serving a 20-year sentence in federal prison. Her conviction was a pivotal moment, not just for the survivors who testified against her, but because her trial and appeals produced depositions and testimony that were sealed for years and later became part of the archive of court records that scholars, journalists, and attorneys have worked to make public. Beginning in the early 2010s and intensifying over the last decade, dozens of women filed civil lawsuits against Epstein and Maxwell, alleging years of abuse beginning when they were minors. One of the most notable plaintiffs was Virginia Giuffre, whose civil claim produced evidence including flight logs, communications between recruiters, and testimonies that would later be unsealed. Giuffre's story became widely known as she described how recruiters approached her at a young age and eventually brought her into Epstein's circle. Her memoir, published in late 2025 after her death earlier that year, detailed her experiences with Epstein, Maxwell, and other powerful figures whose names appeared in the court archives. The civil suits and their unsealing over time laid the groundwork for a large body of documentation that later became known collectively as the Epstein files. In 2025, after years of advocacy by victims and lawmakers, the U.S. Congress passed the Epstein Files Transparency Act, a bipartisan law requiring the Department of Justice to release all unclassified documents and records relating to Jeffrey Epstein and associated investigations. Signed into law in November of 2025, the act mandated that the government open its files by a specified deadline, with limited redactions allowed only for victim protection and ongoing legal concerns. The law was a significant development because it represented a rare instance in which so much sealed material was ordered to be made public, highlighting decades of sealed testimony, grand jury transcripts, police reports, financial records, flight manifests, correspondence, and photographs compiled during investigations that spanned multiple jurisdictions. In mid-December 2025, the Justice Department began releasing the first tranche of these documents. Thousands of records were published, including photos of Epstein's properties and travels, phone records, handwritten notes, and other evidence collected by investigators over the years. Some of the initial releases contained references to high-profile individuals who had intersected with Epstein's life. Although presence in photographs or logs does not equate to allegations of criminal conduct by those figures. Much of the material was heavily redacted, often to protect the identities of victims or to withhold information related to ongoing legal matters. In some cases, entire pages were blacked out, drawing criticism from lawmakers and survivors who argued that the initial release did not live up to the spirit of full transparency. As the DOJ worked through the massive backlog of material, officials announced in late December 2025 that more than 1 million additional documents related to Epstein had been uncovered by the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York and the FBI. The department explained that this newly discovered material must be reviewed and legally redacted before public release, a process expected to take several more weeks. This delay came after the mandated deadline had already passed, prompting lawmakers and advocates to pressure the DOJ for faster compliance, and in some cases consider legal measures against officials for incomplete disclosure. The volume of material was so vast that lawyers and analysts were reported to be working around the clock to process the files in compliance with federal law. Within the released files have been early complaints dating back to the 1990s, including records of a 1996 report to authorities describing alleged abuse in Palm Beach and threats by Epstein to victims if they spoke out. Police reports also recounted victims being lured to Epstein's homes under false pretenses, groomed through promises of modeling or money, and later abused. These historical records underscored what survivors and critics long argued: that Epstein's pattern of misconduct stretched back decades, and that earlier responses by law enforcement were insufficient. The files have also revealed details of how investigations unfolded, the roles of various associates, and the challenges of bringing powerful individuals to justice. They include call logs, interviews, financial records, and more, offering researchers and journalists a richer, if still incomplete, picture of the full extent of Epstein's network and activities. Legislators, academics, and advocates have combed through the material, seeking accountability not just for Epstein, but for institutions and individuals who may have enabled, ignored, or failed to act on warning signs for years. Through all this, the public narrative continues to evolve. Epstein's death means he will never stand trial on the federal charges that would have defined the criminal phase of his case. But his legacy is now bound up in the ongoing release of documents, the testimonies of survivors, the legal consequences borne by his associates, and the broader questions about how wealth and influence can shape justice. The story has also intersected with political debate, with some public figures weighing in on the release and interpretation of the files, emphasizing different aspects of the disclosures, while others caution against drawing premature conclusions from fragmentary records. Today, even as more documents are prepared for release and new analysis unfolds, the Epstein story remains a subject of intense public interest and ongoing legal and historical inquiry. For victims and their advocates, the archives hold painful reminders of what was endured. For journalists and historians, they provide an unprecedented window into one of the most complex criminal investigations of the 21st century. And for the broader public, the revelations continue to prompt reflection on power, accountability, and the long journey toward justice that extends far beyond Epstein's death.